What we want to talk about today is why in the world maintain urban trees. So if we remember, kind of the whole idea behind what we're doing, what we're working with you guys on, is to help you think about why trees matter in the place that we live, what they do for us, what we can do for them. And this is important because there are lots and lots of communities across northern Indiana and around the country, like ours, that are planting lots and lots of trees and are building like forestry programs, urban forestry programs to take care of those trees, which means that they need people who are trained and interested to do that work. There is work out there for people who are interested and have gained some experience, some knowledge, if they want it. And it's good work. It's interesting work. It's exciting work. Would you agree, Melanie? Melanie is one of our urban foresters and is getting ready to sit for a big certification exam that's kind of been 3 years in the training. And she's been studying her butt off, and she, right now, I'm sure knows details about things that I either never knew or have forgotten because she's working hard at it. So this is all to say, what we want to think about today, what I'm going to talk to you about today, why maintain urban trees, is part of this whole program that we've laid out to hopefully spark your interest. It's not for everybody, but I think it's really interesting work. I think it's exciting work, and the biggest thing is, it is really, really important work. Without trees, you don't have a community. People live where trees live. Think about that. Think about that. No, I mean, just run through your memory really quickly and notice in your life, where are the cities and the towns? What are in those cities and towns? What are in those streets, in those backyards? And what would it be like without trees? Would people be there? Nope, they wouldn't. So trees are really, really important. Okay, start clicking through here. So I mean, these are just a few of the things that we want to think about. How maintaining trees can help them to live longer. We want to think about what makes trees risky, that is, maybe dangerous, how to lessen the kind of danger or risk that they may have. And then we want to think about the benefits of having trees, where we live. And these are a few of the other, these are some more of the details that we'll get into as we talk. So we'll start by just talking a little bit about the reasons for pruning a tree. And pruning is one part of maintaining trees, right? What does pruning mean? What does it mean to prune something? Anybody know? To trim, yeah, another word is trimming, right? It means removing a part of a plant, in this case, a tree. And there could be, or there are many reasons. So there's safety reasons, that's like risk and danger. The health of the tree can be improved by pruning. And the aesthetics. What does aesthetic mean? Yeah, how something looks. If it looks good, right? So these are some of the 3 reasons that we might trim or prune a tree. All right, so this is kind of to the point that I was making about people and trees. So you don't have to have a house with no trees in it in order, to avoid a tree falling on your house. If you take care of the tree, then you're not going to have this. And we're going to talk more about this tree a little bit later on, because these people did not take care of their tree, despite Melanie and I and Kendall talking to them about it. Hey, look out, this is going to happen. And then guess what? It happened. You took that picture? No, the guy who brought the crane out to lift the tree off of the house took that picture and gave it to me. So, pruning or trimming is one of the things that we can do to keep a tree with a good structure. And this is an illustration. You can see this is the same tree, just further back and a close up. But trees, the way they grow sometimes causes them to fall apart. And that's what this is illustrating. These are trees. This is a tree that had poor structure. That means that the way the branches were connected to the trunk here were never going to be strong. And it was only a matter of time before a storm or something like that caused branches to fall out of the tree. And in this case, you can see that once upon a time, this is where a branch was connected into this trunk. And then because it was poor structure, the whole thing tore out. And you can see how far it tore down. I mean, that's probably about a 5-foot tear from the top to the bottom, which ruins this tree. This tree will never be able to heal from such a gigantic wound. And this branch here, which is this one also, the same thing was going to happen to that one eventually, because a tight, we call this a union in the branches, is always a really weak kind of union. And a weak union is one that's going to fail. And so if somebody had been working on this tree probably 15 years before, they could have pruned out those branches before it got to this point, and could have saved the tree. So this is part of the reason that we prune. It's to help the structure to be better. And this is maybe a little bit hard to see, but these two pictures give you an idea of good structure versus poor structure. So with good structure, you've got branches that come out kind of at right angles. When you've got poor structure, you've got these really tight unions. There's one here and there's another one here, and because it's got this tight union, this one just peeled right apart, just like in the picture before it. And structure can have a lot to do with the species of tree too. So this here is an oak tree. In fact, it's just right outside back here. Oak trees tend to have better structure than redbuds. Redbuds are notorious for these really tight unions, and something that's called included bark, which makes it even worse, where the bark gets kind of caught down in that union, and the bark is dead tissue as opposed to live tissue. Dead tissue is like this. You can see that it would just peel apart. Live tissue is like this, and it locks together and makes it much harder to break. So with pruning, we can correct some of these poor structure kinds of issues. And if we know what kind of tree it is, that gives us some even greater clues about what to do. So aesthetics, the way a tree looks, you probably heard it said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Which means that, not everybody sees the same thing the same way. So, I mean, a tree like this has pretty awful structure compared to this one, but somebody might think that this is a really beautiful tree and we don't want to touch that. It's just right the way it is. And if it's not in a place where it's going to fall apart and damage something because it has poor structure, then, well, who cares? That's perfectly fine. This is a tree that we usually, in the urban forestry profession, we would say, this is a tree with good structure. And there's something about that makes it maybe look good to us. But most importantly, I would say the good structure here is going to help it to be a safe, healthy tree for a long time in a park setting. This is in a park, and we want to have safe trees in a park because we don't want trees or parts of trees falling on people or kids, as they're out playing there. So we look for good structure, but we also look for something that looks good and feels good. We think about that depending on where it is. So there's a right way to prune and a wrong way to prune. And some of you guys were here this past spring when Steve Thomas, he did a little presentation, and then we did some work outside on actually doing some pruning, making cuts, thinking about the right way to do that. And so some of this will be a little bit of review. But there are two main kinds of bad pruning practices, and topping, which is what you see in this picture, and stub cuts. Topping is like, that's like the worst thing you can do to a tree. That's like death by 1,000 cuts, literally. So this is another example of pruning. This is here in Goshen, or of topping. This is here in Goshen, and these trees were probably topped a year before the picture was taken. So you can still kind of see where the cuts were made, but you can also see some smaller, hairier stuff that's growing out from those cuts. And what happens when you top a tree is, you just kind of, without thinking, you just remove a bunch of the growth, and you may open up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 cuts across the canopy of the tree. So one, that's more than it'll ever be able to heal. Two, the tree is going to try to replace everything that it's lost by making new growth below those cuts. Three, because those cuts don't heal, decay is going to work its way down through those cuts towards the points where all the new growth is coming. And four, because you've got decay entering from the wounds and lots of new growth that's getting heavier and heavier, what do you suppose is going to happen? You've got decay and you've got lots of weight. It's going to fall over. It's going to fall apart. So people top trees because they think it's going to make them more safe. In the long run, it actually makes them a lot worse. Yep, a lot worse, more dangerous. So then you got to pay somebody to come back again to work on it, to remove all the dead and damaged stuff. And then new growth comes back again and makes it worse again. So you got to pay somebody again. You might as well have just removed it in the first place, or found somebody who knows what they're doing. Right, this is the point I'm making. Many of the wounds in a top tree just never heal, and then the tree becomes unbalanced and becomes more and more dangerous than it ever was in the first place. So stub cuts, and stub cuts is essentially what you're left with when you top a tree. But stub cuts is also what happens when somebody doesn't know how to make the right kinds of pruning cuts, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second, and you may remember it. But it's the same kind of thing with all these stub cuts here. The tree can't really heal those wounds because the cuts were placed way out here on these limbs where there isn't enough live tissue that the tree is going to support or keep alive in order to seal over those open wounds. And so slowly but surely, rot, decay is going to enter, fungus, insects, bacteria are going to find their way in, and unless these stub cuts get removed to give the tree a chance to actually heal and seal those openings, the decay is going to penetrate all the way into the trunk of the tree, and then it's a matter of time before it becomes a dangerous tree and a risk for falling apart. So stub cuts are a no-no. for proper pruning also. So there are different kinds of pruning that help us to accomplish different objectives or different aims, different things that we want to do. If we've got a tree that feels like it's too tall next to our house, there are ways to deal with that other than topping the tree, right? So as a for instance. So the crown thinning would be in a case where you've got a tree that has lots of branches that are kind of crossing each other and getting in each other's way, and they're rubbing and they're opening wounds, and that can be bad for the tree. So crown thinning removes some of the interior so that the tree is a little more open, which allows air to move through there, and that can be a healthy thing for the tree. Crown raising, it's not quite the right term to me. This is not so much raising the crown of the tree. The crown usually means the top of the tree. In this case, what this is illustrating is removing stuff from the bottom of the tree, so that you can see what's on the other side of that tree, maybe a stop sign or something like that. So a crown reduction, this is the right term for what to do with a tree that is so tall that it feels dangerous. So instead of just topping everything like it's a bush or like it's a hedge or something, you carefully look at the tree and you figure out where to make the right cuts so that you don't end up with stub cuts all over the place, so that you don't end up with thousands of cuts all over the place. The idea between crown reduction is to bring the height of the tree down by only making a minimum of cuts. And you have to learn how to do this. You have to learn how to read the tree, but it can be done. It can be done so that you don't injure the tree unnecessarily, and so that the tree has the ability to actually seal those wounds off in a timely fashion so that decay doesn't begin to enter. Crown reduction. Let me get a drink of water. Crown cleaning. If you look at those illustrations, you kind of see a tree that's got some dead stuff or some broken stuff in it that is becoming a risk for falling out of the tree and damaging something or hurting somebody. So crown cleaning is how to carefully remove those kinds of things. Again, always with the eye on the safety and the health of the tree. How to remove stuff out of a tree so that it can actually heal quickly, as opposed to hanging out with an open wound. Imagine yourself with an open wound that never heals, right? Or that takes 3 years to heal or 5 years to heal. That's not going to be good for you, and it's not going to be good for a tree either. Trees have some different ways of managing, but the quicker the tree is able to seal off the opening, the better it is for it. So, we'll talk a little bit about how to make a proper pruning cut. And those of you who were here last year, you may remember, or last spring, you may remember some of this. This is a little hard to see with the light, but these pictures all show different examples of a good pruning cut. This one right here, you can actually see some of the new growth that is working at sealing off that opening. And we love to see this little donut here, this donut of growth that's slowly working its way to seal that wound. But it requires knowing where to make the cut. So what's important to know is that, especially in deciduous trees, that is, trees that have leaves and lose their leaves in the fall, like they just did, right right around here and around here. So what we're talking about are the branch collar, which is underneath the branch collar, and then the branch ridge, which is on the top. These parts of the tree and of the branch structure are packed with growth cells, and the growth cells have growth hormones that are helping to hold the branch in place, but are also there and ready to work at healing a branch if it's lost. So again, those cells with those growth hormones are on the underside of the branch and at the top and kind of surrounding it too. So if you cut the branch out here, the tree and the branch doesn't have access to all of those growth cells down here. And also, if you cut the branch back here, then you're cutting off all of those cells. However, if you learn how to find the right place to cut, then you can keep all of those cells and all of those growth hormones intact, and that allows the tree to react as quickly as it possibly can by growing over the open wound and sealing it off. One really good way to help you think about where to make the right cut is, so the right cut is almost always the smallest opening. So if you imagine, if you made your cut across here versus across here, which of these two cuts is going to have the larger opening when you're done? This one here? This is going to have the largest opening. That's right, by far, right? So if you make the smaller cut, or the smallest cut that you can find, that's usually going to be the right one. That's usually going to be the right one. You can look for this swollen part here, which is the branch collar. That's a good indication, but it's not always easy to see. So then you kind of look for the branch ridge, which is up here, and then you look for the shortest place to place your cut. And it takes experience, right? It takes practice. But it's good to kind of know what it looks like, even in a classroom, even in December. And so if you remember also from working with Steve, there are some different methods for making the proper cut. So the first thing you're doing is you're looking for the branch collar up here, and you're looking for the branch ridge, and you're looking for the collar down here, which is the same over here. If you've got a small limb or a small branch, you can make it with a single cut, either with a pruning shears or a saw. But if you've got a really big one, a really big branch that has a lot of weight, then we typically want to think about 3 cuts. So you make your first cut here to kind of relieve the weight. This is a little hard to understand in a classroom setting. And then you make a second cut to cut all of the weight off. And then you make a third finish cut at the place that you want it to be. So what would happen if you just made one cut on a big branch? If you're cutting down from the top, what might happen? It would fall, and on its way, if you can, it's going to split it, right? It's going to tear it. Yeah, right. So, if this is the branch you're cutting, and you're cutting it here, you're cutting it here, you're cutting it here, all this weight out here is slowly coming loose, and when my arm lets loose, it's going to tear. Boy, this is gruesome. It's going to tear all the way down my side, and finally it'll let loose, right? Yeah, right. And so instead of a nice small wound, you end up with this gigantic gash down the side of the tree, right? So These are the kinds of things that we're thinking about when we're thinking about the proper cut. How can we set up our work so that the smallest amount of damage is done to the tree? The smallest amount of damage. Because the tree, what we're doing when we're pruning a tree is we're wounding it. We are wounding it. Trees have remarkable healing properties, but they're just like us. They would rather not be wounded, and so whatever we can do to keep it to a minimum is best. So this is just some other illustrations of good cuts. You heard me mention the donut of healing. So you can see it here. It's a little dark, but it's happening here. This is a tulip tree right here. Tulips are pretty fast healers. This one, I think that's a maple. And this one looks like a honey locust down here. But that's happening because we made good cuts. We placed the cuts at the right place on the trees, at the place where they connected to the trunk. We were looking for the branch collar underneath and the branch bark ridge above, so that we could make the right cut. And we were also thinking about the time of year, which I think we'll get to here, because that matters too. And I kind of learned that the hard way. The time of year really matters. So some bad cuts, and this is the thing. Everybody learns, and the way we often learn is by making mistakes. So this is one of mine right here. This is a honey locust right on Main Street of all places, and this is maybe a couple years after I started, and I was still learning like mad. I'm still learning, right? I'm still learning every day, but I really had a lot to learn back then, and so kind of what we were talking about, not removing enough weight from a heavy branch. This was a big branch that had to be removed, and I removed some of the weight from it, but I didn't remove enough. And so I was cutting down from the top, and it got about here, and all of a sudden it just let loose, and it tore all the way down. In fact, it tore a little further down than this. This is like a year after I made that cut. And so you can see that it's starting to heal, but you can clearly see that this part of the wound is a lot smaller than all of this down here too. If I'd made a good cut, it would have had a much smaller wound. Luckily, this is a very forgiving tree, and if you go down on the corner of Lincoln and Main, the tree is still there. It's completely sealed over. The scar isn't even there anymore. Yeah. So, right, this is a good question, and you can go from the bottom. It's pretty tricky because if you start from the bottom, you want to make sure that you end at the right place up here. You might go into the tree, which would create another kind of a problem, an even bigger problem. Or you might come out too far on the limb, and so then you've got kind of a stub cut, and you have to work your way back. It's tricky. It is tricky. In this particular case, like I said, I left too big of a stub for my final cut. I really should have made it quite small, so that so that the weight wouldn't just pull it and peel it the way it did. It's better to cut from the top if you can, because you have a lot more control over what's happening. Cutting from the bottom, you're working against gravity. Cutting from the top, you're working with gravity. That helps a lot too. But sometimes there's no other way to do it than to come from the bottom, and then that's just tricky, and that takes practice. Yeah, other cuts, this is what's called a flush cut, where they cut all the way into the branch ridge and into the branch collar. So it's a much bigger cut than it needed to be. And this is a stub cut. It's a little hard to see. But those are some other illustrations of bad cuts. Right, okay, so I was mentioning it also matters when in the year you prune. So the ideal time to prune is kind of a really tight window of time, and it's roughly February to the beginning of April. So late winter / early spring. And that's because, as it says, if we can make the cuts, if we can wound the tree right at the end of winter, right at the beginning of spring, there's no fungus that's active at that time, no bacteria that's active at that time, insects aren't active at that time, moving some of those fungi and bacteria around. So that's a great thing. The tree is dormant also, so it's not active. It's kind of like if you have to have somebody cutting on you, you'd rather be dormant too, right? You'd rather be knocked out. Well, that's better for trees too. But then most importantly, well, I don't know if it's most importantly, equally important is the fact that if we do our pruning late winter, early spring, then it means that when they wake up, when they break dormancy, they've got the entire growing season ahead of them, all summer, all spring, and all summer long, to work at healing and sealing. So they have the longest possible amount of time to work on the process of putting themselves back together. What I learned the hard way was, for a while, what I understood was any time the tree is dormant is a good time to prune. So I'd be out in December, maybe even November, pruning because we had so much work to do. So I'd be out here pruning in November and December and January, working and working and working. And I was getting good at making my cuts and reading the trees, and so that was important. But I would come back the next year and I'd see these lovely cuts that I made. They were the proper cuts. And instead, the wound had grown. And I was like, what is going on? Why is the wound larger when I made the right cut? Well, I finally read a study that actually originated in Europe that demonstrated, and it makes complete sense. I don't know why I didn't even think of this, that when you prune, even in late summer, but especially if you're doing it in the fall and into early winter, you cut the tree open, and the live tissue that's been exposed, it's not ready to start healing, right? Because it's dormant, and because it's cold, and because it's dry, and all of that live tissue that should be helping the tree to heal actually dries out and dies back. So what started as a small wound becomes a much bigger wound. So that was the hard lesson I learned. So as Melanie knows, we really focus our work as much as we can between February and April. We inevitably have to do pruning work into the early summer. It often goes into July, midsummer, but then we try to stop at that point so that trees have as much time as they can to begin sealing. And sometimes you can't, if a storm comes through and there's damage, and it's October, November, January, well, then you have to go and you have to do what you have to do. But ideally, you do it in a pretty small amount of time. Sorry, I didn't fix that photo there. So corrective and structural pruning, just really quickly. This is primarily what we do in our department. We are working with young trees that have been in the ground anywhere from 3 to 12-ish years, sometimes 15 years. So they're pretty small like this one, but they could also be as tall as 25, 30 feet in some cases, would you say, Melanie? Depending on the species. And what we're doing is we're helping to limb them up so that they're not in the way of people or cars, or so that street department doesn't come along and hack them up. We're looking for defects or poor connections in the tree and kind of removing those, helping to set the tree up, as straight as possible so that it has as few issues as possible decades from now. And if you think back to that tree way at the beginning, tree way back here. Oops. If somebody had done good corrective or structural pruning on this tree, like I said, 15 or maybe even 20 years prior, this never would have happened to it. So this is what Melanie and Kendall and I are working on every February through April. We're out working on these young trees to remove these kinds of issues so that a tree like this doesn't happen, so that it can live for 50, 60, 70, 80 years and provide, all these benefits. Yeah, so the sideways photo is an illustration of not structural pruning. That's a topping job right there. And that's just around the corner from where Melanie lives. And it's a crazy looking tree now. I mean, that's crazy, but it's even crazier because it's all bushed out, and it's, when we were talking about this last week, we were saying that we need to get over there and take more pictures of it. Yes, because this would be a great time to look, to get some good pictures to see what it looks like now, because inevitably there's going to be decay all over the place. There's going to be all kinds of wild growth all over the place. So I'm going to get a quick drink. Okay, let's see if we can kind of run through this in about 15 minutes here. Sorry, and look at that date. That's a super old date. I didn't change that either. 2012. 2012. That's how long you've been teaching. Yeah, that's a long time, isn't it? That's 13 years ago. Whew. All right. So risk tree assessment. So I mean, this kind of goes in with what I was talking about, pruning, right? I mean, that photo that we just went back to shows a tree that is in bad shape and that has a lot of risk that's built into it now. And luckily, that tree has been removed because of the risk that it had. It's important, as we're thinking about the reasons for maintaining urban trees, it's important to think about what risk in a tree is and what it looks like and what we can do about it, because there are options. Right, so this is just what I'm saying. Okay, so what is a risk tree? Well, it's a tree that maybe the entirety of the tree or a part of the tree. There's something about it that tells us that there's a safety issue. Something could go wrong with this tree. Something could get damaged. Somebody could get hurt. So that picture right there is the same as the one on the left, right? So back to 2012. 2012, it took a picture of the base of this tree. 8 years later, 2020, this opening here had become this opening here, and there is this gigantic hole opening up here in the tree. That's 2020, right? 8 years later. Well, you've seen the picture on the right before. So January of 2025, this is what it looked like. And then 3 months later, this is what it looked like. So 2012, that first photo is from 2012. 2012 was the first time that I contacted the property owner and I said, hey, there's some issues with this tree. I think we need to start talking about removing it because something's going to happen. And I kept telling him and I kept taking pictures, and it took 13 years for it to happen. But the point is, and I'm not a rocket science. I think most people could have looked at that tree back in 2012 and seen the hole in it at the base and connected the dots and said, something's going to happen here, right? Something's going to fall apart. What you can't see in these photos is this guy, he filled the wound up with spray foam, thinking that was going to, I don't know. I'm not sure what he was thinking it was going to do. He filled it up with spray foam, and well, then there was a big storm that came through in March of this year, and that's what happened to it. So what's crazy is there's another tree just as bad as this one right next to it, out of the photo frame, that he still hasn't done anything with, and we keep telling him. So I don't know. I don't know why the lesson hasn't been learned yet. So risk in a tree. This is a real photo. I didn't take this one, but that's a real photo. That's a tree that took off the front porch, the front, part of a house.
That's one tree.
That's one tree. That is one tree. So risk is the likelihood of an event which is caused by defects in a tree. The event would be falling because of defects, combined with the severity of the potential consequences, which is all a fancy way of saying what's going to get damaged. So risk is defects in a tree and the targets, the things that tree or tree part could fall on. So we're looking at a tree and we're noticing defects, and we're noticing what the tree could fall on or what the branch could fall on, and that helps us to think about how much risk there is. So all trees have risk, right? Any tree can fall. It's kind of an act of faith to go and walk under any tree, but there are lots of things that we can notice about a tree that can make us feel completely safe about walking under a tree, or feel like, no, I'm going to walk all the way around it because I can see something's going to happen. So how do we identify the ones that we're concerned about? And in this tree, you can see there's a big opening in the side of it right there. That tree has been removed because, there's a sidewalk there and there are homes there and you can't see it, but there's a street there too. Yeah. Yeah, yes, right. Yep. NIPSCO is out there working today. I've asked them to remove that one. They're not sure that they have the budget, but we'll see. We'll see. So, what is a target? So, it's, as this says, it's people or property that could be damaged, but there are other kinds of targets too, right? It could be, a swimming pool full of kids or something like. Well, that's people in property, right? So, in the illustration, it looks like there's a dead limb over the person, over the house. Those are the targets. So there's risk there. But the risk is determined by, whether this has been dead out here for 5 years, it's getting really brittle and really, really dangerous, or maybe it just died in the past month for some reason. Maybe there was a disease or something, verticillium wilt or something like that. If it hasn't been dead for very long, there is risk that is going to increase for sure, but it's not really immediate yet. It's something that needs to be taken care of, but it's not terribly immediate. So different kinds of targets here, right? I mean, top left is a fence, bottom left, a car. Top right, that's the road. Bottom right, that's the road and power lines. So different kinds of targets, and so different kinds of consequences, different kinds of risk. We've seen this picture before too, right? There's no targets here, so there's no risk. But in my opinion, this doesn't look like a great neighborhood to live in. Looks pretty sterile. And this is a neighborhood that's just to the west of us. There are a lot more trees here now than when that picture was taken. We should go out there and take a picture there and find this. Yes, yeah, thanks, Melanie. So we can see what's happening. So the site of a tree also influences the kind of risk, right? So, I mean, if you're looking at this picture here, what are the targets that you could name for this tree? What are the targets, the potential targets? Yeah, right. The light post. Yeah. What else? What are other targets? Sidewalk, the road, other trees. Right. You said sidewalk and road, but part of what you mean is people on the sidewalk or the road too, right? Like cars and. Yeah. Okay. You got it, Christian. Yeah. There's a house over here that's not in the picture, so that's another target. Probably it's not going to fall across the street and hit that tree and hit that house, but there. It could knock down another tree. Domino effect. Yeah. That would be crazy. Could happen. Yeah. So the other thing to think about then is that there are other things that are happening around this tree that could make it an even greater risk, such as the presence of the pavement, which makes it hard for the tree to root completely in some different ways. Salt in the winter can really degrade the quality of the soil, which makes it harder for the tree to get the nutrients it needs to grow and to take care of itself. So, I mean, and you can see the other things that are listed there that may make it harder for this tree to be healthy, and the less healthy a tree, the greater the risk it begins to pose. This is a tree that's still standing. Its days are numbered. We just have to keep watching that one. Right, so like just out the window here, right? Across the river there, lots of trees, but out there's no risk, right? I mean, if the tree falls out in the woods, that's not a big deal. The chances of somebody or something valuable being out there when that happens, I mean, are the chances are 1 in millions that anybody or anything is going to get hurt. So we don't really think about that as a risk tree. Right. Okay. So nature has value too. That's right. Other trees. I mean, if a big limb falls out of that tree, it's going to damage some other trees, and who knows? Some animals may get caught up in that too. So I mean, that's not nothing. That's I'm glad you pointed that out, because those things have value too. In urban forestry, we tend to be very focused on people and the things that are most valuable to people. I'm not saying that that's necessarily right, but when we talk about trees and risk in the urban forest setting, then we're not really talking about those other things. I think we ought to. So that's a good point. Right, so what kinds of tree defects to look for? So, I mean, here's a street tree. This is another one right along the street, and it's got another big hole right in the side of it. This tree has been removed. And you can see some targets here. In fact, I've named one, right? So the street, the fence, there's a garden on the other side of that fence. Somebody could be working out in that garden and something falls or the tree falls. What's that? Yeah, right. Yep. Electric or telecom or something like that. Those are other targets. So we're obviously looking for openings in a tree, right? Where we can see that decay is happening or is going to happen. Those are defects that tell us we need to pay attention to this. This is only going to get worse, and we're going to have to do something about it. I mean, where is the risk tree in this picture? Yeah. Everything else has leaves on it, right? Except that one. That tells us something. That tells us that a tree is dead, and it might have thought it was winter. That's right. It's a little bit late. Maybe we should give it another month or two if it comes back. And then probably we need to cut it, right? Because that one is going to become risky if it's not already. But then we also look at the roots or the root crown. Sometimes we call the root crown the root flare, the place where the roots kind of open into the ground. We've seen that picture on the top before. So an opening, or maybe there are missing buttress roots. Those are the big ones. In a tree like this, we don't see any of the root crown or the root flare, and that's because this tree has root girdling, where the roots are actually circling around the tree and choking it. You know, so as the tree grows, it's supposed to expand, right? Get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the root flare should flare out around it. But if the roots are circled around the trunk of the tree as it grows, those roots get tighter and tighter and tighter, and it looks like a stovepipe going into the ground. That tree is choking itself to death. And we would see things up in the canopy too that tell us something's happening. We would see that that it's not leafing out well, and then we look at the bottom and we'd say, I see what's happening. And that's a tree that has increasing risk because it's not healthy. And of course, we look at the trunks, right? Are there openings in the trunks? And what kinds of openings? What are their shapes? What's in those openings? That bottom one, that was caused by somebody with a hatchet. And I had to clean up that wound, and it actually healed. It actually sealed over, and that one's okay. And then, of course, we look at the branches. So we look at the attachments on the bottom there, and we can see some poor attachments, some poor unions. And the one on top, we can see some gigantic openings in those limbs. Eventually, it's going to just fall out of there. So anybody who's under there, yikes. And then other things to be aware of, right? Like, so there's fungus on the left there. The one on the top right, that's a canker. Sometimes cankers seal themselves off, but sometimes they're open, and so that's a place that decay begins to happen. Leaning trees are something else we pay attention to. Now, a leaning tree isn't necessarily a hazard or a risk. If a tree has grown its entire life leaning, then the root system is completely compensated, and it's really not a problem. But if it's shifted for some reason, maybe a storm or something like that, or something, like construction around the tree, and then it begins to lean, then that's certainly a sign that we have to pay attention to. So then, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can work to correct a risk tree. notice which one is at the bottom. What's the option at the bottom there? And notice that it's at the bottom, right? And that's on purpose. It's because it's the last resort. Yeah, right. Removing the tree is the last thing that we want to do. We want to look at everything else that we can do to try to maintain the tree, to determine whether it can continue to do the things that it needs to do for us. If nothing else seems like it's going to work, or if we've tried several other things and it's not working, then we arrive at remove the tree. But it's the last thing that we want to get to. We want to try to keep big trees in our cities and towns as long as we can. So the last thing we want to talk about is just the benefits of trees, right? So we're maintaining trees because we want them to be healthy. And we want them to be healthy because of all of these different things that they do. I don't know whether you guys can read. I mean, can you read these things at all? Is it too small to read some of that print? Social cohesion, sense of place, cultural links to the past. Social cohesion means, the way people feel about being together and being with each other, if they like each other. And trees help us to do that. How do trees help us to feel good about each other? Play that out for me. How would that work? Think a little bit about that. Besides the trees in this photo, what else is missing? People.
Cars.
Nobody is out here. Nobody's out here. The neighbors aren't meeting each other. They're not talking to each other. They're not getting to know each other. They're not helping each other out. And one of the reasons is they're what? Yeah, right. Their AC bill, for one thing, must be really, really high. Yeah, right. On a 90-degree day, 95-degree day in the summer, it's baking out there. If there were trees in this neighborhood, the research shows that people will come out and they'll meet each other. They'll get to know each other. Yeah. Probably so. Right. Because the tree shade would help to keep the moisture in the ground, cool things off. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So people would be out there if there were trees. And there is great research that demonstrates this. Let's see. So, and this illustration just lists a bunch of different things. Right. So encouraging outdoor recreation, traffic calming. When there are trees along streets, people drive slower and they're more observant. It's amazing. Air quality, for sure, right? What are some of the other things here? Yeah, reduced air conditioning costs, for sure. Increased property value. Trees actually increase our property value because people want to be where trees are. Summer shade, for sure. Noise reduction. Reduced surface flooding. Trees actually help to absorb storm water when we have storm events so that we don't have as much flooding. More shade, right. Yep. They keep us cool. They keep us cool. So these are just some of the benefits. I'm going to try to play this video here for you. Okay, so yeah, these are the reasons that maintaining our urban trees are important, kind of laid out in the video here, and I hope I've given you a little idea of what it takes to maintain those trees so that we can have these benefits. I wasn't planning on taking us outside today. I hope that's okay. I hope you're okay with that. It's a little bit cold for that. But do you have any questions or observations or anything that this made you think about? And I get it.
What about you, Do you have any questions?
It's all right. It's all right. It's after lunch. I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Can trees also help to power your solar panels?
Can trees help to power your solar panels?
I know it's mostly the sunlight.
Yep. Right. So the short answer is no. There's kind of an idea that trees are a problem for solar panels, and in the sense that trees may block the sunlight from hitting the solar panels. Yes, they are a problem in that sense. But I think that's kind of I think it's kind of a false answer, because so solar energy and solar panels are a really important part of the way that we need to work at imagining the way we use energy and the way that we generate energy. I've got solar panels on my house, and I have to prune some trees every couple of years just to keep it open, right? So I'm thinking about that. I'm doing that. But the other thing is, trees also pull lots of carbon dioxide out of the air. Carbon dioxide is kind of the most important greenhouse gas that's causing climate change, right? So one of the things that comes along with climate change is hotter summers, hotter temperatures, and there are kind of two ways to deal with hotter temperatures. One is air conditioning, which requires energy. In Indiana, most of our energy still comes from burning coal. Coal produces carbon dioxide, which creates climate change, which creates more heat, which means we got to crank up the AC some more. So I said there are two ways to keep cool. One is AC, and the other is shade. Right. So we can go with AC, that requires more energy, which creates more carbon dioxide, which increases climate change, which drives temperatures up, which requires more AC, on and on and on. Or we can use trees, we can plant trees that keep us cool basically for free and pull carbon dioxide out of the air to help slow climate change. So trees do not directly help solar panels to be more productive, but I think trees can and are and need to be used kind of in combination with solar panels as a way to, to reduce the cooling costs that we have. It's not always easy to figure that out, and at my house, I'm always tinkering. Part of it is I love tinkering with trees, so I like climbing up in them and doing that kind of work. But I think trees are not an enemy of solar energy. I think they work together, and just have to be creative. That's a really good question. That's a really good question.